Hello, everybody. Happy middle of summer. Oh, I like that Martina's on here. Hi, Maya. Martina asked me this question today. That's why we're on here. She's like, Kat, can you please speak more about the parallel dimensions? It's like, of course. Of course I can. So that was the inspiration. Whenever you guys have questions, like, ask me. Like, I nerd out on this stuff. It was a little while before I got introduced into the deeper aspects of yoga and like the yoga philosophy. But I remember my one teacher that did it, she's still my dear friend, Jana Romer. She really like broke my mind open of like all the things that I felt as a kid, like the parallel realities, like doing dream work, like all the things that I used to do that I thought was like, eventually was told was kind of weird and like witchy in a sense. Is like the deeper philosophies of the yoga and like the superpowers that you get as a yogi, which I really want to make clear as we go through this discussion, is that nobody is more gifted than anybody else. We are all created in equality, not inequality, in equality. So at every moment, and I want to start it with this, every moment you are deliberately creating your own experience. Like you cannot have an experience in this reality that you are not fully committed to. And so when we talk about parallel realities or alternate dimensions or, the things that make us think like, oh my God, there's something out there. There's not. There's just a choice that you've made in this moment to see a specific reality that you've agreed to, that you're living out and reconfirming by choice day after day after day after day. And so it's no different than the choice to maybe be in a job you don't like, right? You're reconfirming the reality of it day after day after day, so it's never going to end. To be with a relationship that doesn't serve you. By staying there, you reconfirm the reality of it again and again and again. And so it is really the first step, and that we talk about all the time, is self-ownership, right? You are always, hi Shay, you're always in self-ownership over the experience that you're having. And so for many of us, we've been raised in a society that has put a lot of value on the 3D dimension. And so this is the dimension of the physical body having a human experience. So if I'm like driving in my car, and someone sees me, they see like a person in their car driving and like, oh, she's got brown hair and blue eyes and, she's listening to loud music, like whatever the experience is for them. And that's like the most surface level experience that is truly going on. This human body, like the smallest part of the body is the physical body that you see. But it's what we've confirmed is true, because the human body, you, me, everyone, we are fields, right? We are fields of awareness. And so when we're talking about these different dimensions and these different realities, by being in this human dimension and by you watching me right now and us finding each other and you having certain stories about yourself and beliefs about yourself, you've created a specific dimension and time in which you're living, right? And please tell me in the chat if this ever gets like a little too far or you want, like, I'm sure many of you are ready for this. Hi, Kevin. Nice to have you here. I love that all of you are committed to being here in the middle of a day, if it's the middle of your day on a Wednesday. It's so nice outside. I can't wait to get out there. But so what we're aiming to do here as we move into these different dimensions and shifting your own personal reality is looking beyond the scenes of what you're seeing. And so I will say that when you start to do this practice or start to play with these concepts, you're increasing sensitivity, right? And when we increase sensitivity, like there's a reason why a lot of things are hidden from us, right? Is because it's a lot. Right? It's a lot to be able to hear people's thoughts. It's a lot to be able to like decide one day to change your mind and then all of a sudden your whole entire reality shifts. Like it's a lot. And so we tend to want to move slow in the 3D world because that's what we have agreed to and is what we know. It's like, okay, if I want a new job, I have to like do all these steps to apply for this job, and like then I have to quit my job and I have to give them like 2 weeks. And then, like there's a certain linear time dimension that you're agreeing on that happens when you want to say leave a job. This is just an example, right? When in reality, it can also fold. Right? And this is what we talk about, folding time. It's like the moment you make a decision and there's a clear decision and it's like, oh, I'm so set on this new decision, whether it's like, oh, this next job here is the perfect job for me, or I want to create this next thing. The moment you choose it and then you act out of that choice, it's already there, right? And I'll talk about like the future self of you in a moment. But if things are not moving in your reality, it's because you're still 100% committed to it. And this sometimes is really hard to hear, right? Especially if you're like, oh, I really don't like where I am right now. Like, I don't like this part of my life, and I swear I don't want it, but it's still here. There's a part of your belief system. There's a part of your thought system. There's a part of you that is still giving it the energy that it needs for it to be in existence, because we are always creating our realities at every single moment. And so what we're looking at doing really when we, like the yoga practice really puts us in our physical body, and it gives us the time to cultivate ourselves. And so that's one of the greatest gifts that yoga can give you, is if you're in a physical practice, whether yoga, breath work, like, what it's doing is it's anchoring you into this physical dimension that you've agreed upon that also you need. Like, this is one thing I find in the spiritual world, is that there's a lot of spiritual people that leave their bodies and their practice becomes very disembodied. And it doesn't hold the same substance, and it almost seems like not accessible to regular people. When the truth is when you start with the physical body, this is the root of all of your dimensions of being, right? These dimensions of self. And when you refine and hone in on understand your physical body, you actually have to shift your physical body to shift all those other dimensions, because it's the one thing that you can tangibly access with the belief systems and the coding that you hold, if that makes sense. Because when we can tangibly access it and start to move the body into greater alignment, your life can't help but align. As your body feels better and opens and there's space, there's more expansion for the rest of you to unfold, right? And that's what this is. Sorry, I'm very stuffy today. This is all expansion. Like, that's what we're here for. Because when, I know, Raja, amazing. So many people in here. When you are playing with the expansion of the moment, right? You are playing with all of these alternate realities that you have access to. And these alternate realities, well, there's a future self, a future you that, like, I want you for a moment, this little exercise. I want you to close your eyes just for a moment and just like allow to come through like a perfect version of yourself, like with all the things that you want, like all the things that your soul desires, and just let that drop in just as effortlessly as possible without thinking too hard. Let a vision of you of like, this would be my perfect life. Let that drop in for a moment. I'm going to give you like 1 minute as you breathe deep. Okay, so something came in, 100% something came in, right? If nothing came in, replay, pause, right? Get clear on this, because the thing is that there's no such thing. And like, I'm going to say this, don't take this like as the words are, but you can't imagine, like there's no imagination. Like, you can't imagine what doesn't exist. And so if you've imagined something, if you felt something, it's there. And so if you're sitting with someone and you have a thought and you're like, oh, that was kind of like dark or whatever, like, our minds are not separate. Like, we are constantly reading people's thoughts, whether we know it or not, right? And so those future visions of you, or those things that you desire, or those hopes that you have, those are already dimensions in which you are living that reality. And so there's also parts of you when you move into fear where you're like scared to leave your job, and you're like, oh my God, like maybe there was a time where you couldn't make rent and you got kicked out of your place. And then you go into that dimension where you remember those memories, but your energy takes you to that dimension. And then things hook into like energetic resonances, right? So if like, I mean, you wake up grumpy and like everyone's mean to you. You're like, God, what a crappy day, right? That's an energetic resonance, because you woke up in a state and you're just attracting in more of that state. And you wake up in a great mood and there's like this beautiful flow happening, and like just magic is coming into your life. And it's like, oh, wow, that's beautiful, right? Because you put yourself in a different alternate reality with the thoughts and the feelings in your body. And so this is where, I think it's really important in the mornings when you wake up to cultivate these practices. Like, I was talking about Maya with this last night, but if you can't cultivate it in the mornings, it's really hard because you forget about it throughout your day. And then you get to the end of the day and you're like, I just want to go to bed, or like watch TV, or I don't know what people do, all the things that people do, right? And so when you wake up and you cultivate a practice like this, where you sit with yourself in meditation, or you do your yoga, or whatever it is, you are creating a deliberate effort to use your time to cultivate a more sensitized state for yourself. And so you work with the body to eventually look beneath the scenes of what's happening and then to feel beyond the body. And it's hard to do that when our mind's running, when we wake up and we just like go through our day really quickly. We can't be sensitive to different energies, but yet we're still being influenced by them, right? And that's what's key, is you will always be influenced by them. You are always choosing the dimension that you're on. So you have to develop the skills and the techniques to know how to shift between the dimensions. And this is where that vision that you felt of like your future vision of like what that looks like, anchoring in the feeling of that. Like, what does the air smell like? Who's around you? How does it make you feel? Like, I like to play with like either disbelief or shock, or like, oh my God, I can't believe that just happened. And I mean, I've done this so many times, and there's been so many potent moments where I'm like not about to get somewhere and like it's impossible. Like it's like an impossibility. And I just imagine myself there. And with all the experience, whether like I'm trying to get on a boat and it's completely filled, and I'm like, oh, the wind in my hair, it feels so good. And those people beside me, and I'm just like getting the energy of the experience by feeling it, right? Feeling it in my body. And then all of a sudden, somehow I'm like the only person that gets on it, you know? And it's not by accident, and it's not by mistake, right? Even after my stroke, when the doctors came in and they're like, you're a miracle, like you should be so lucky that you're here okay right now. And I was like, it's not an accident. I was literally having my stroke and like anchoring in God consciousness and just met God. Like, these are not accidents when you're cultivating these practices, right? And this is where these superpower skills that we can develop, anybody can do them, but you have to deliberately use your time, right? Because when we're folding time, you have to know how to move between time dimensions. And so that's why we're so drawn to people that like bring us out of ourselves or expand us, or we just want to like listen to them forever. It's like, give me all of your wisdom, right? I mean, I've had mentors like that in my life where I'm like, I need to sit with these people all the time, because they're pulling out that energy in your body, and then you get to sit and reside in that energy, and then you're a resonant match to that energy, and then now all of a sudden you're in a different dimension of time. And so how many times have you ran into the same person again and again in different ways? You're like, how could I have seen this person so many times in so many places? Like, I had that when I was traveling. But it's because you're playing on the same dimension of time. You're with like a resonant match to these people. And this is where there could be like 8 billion people in the world, but you keep running into the same people again and again, even when you're traveling, right? And so you start to see where you're at by what's around you, right? And so this is where, like, when you start to access these inherent abilities that are available to you, right? You have to be able to have discipline to cultivate them, to sit with yourself, to focus yourself, right? Because everything that you see in time is deliberate. You are deliberately choosing it. And so the moment you want to see something different, you have to deliberately learn how to choose something different. And so this is where you get to assume responsibility for time. Like, this is your time. You have to assume responsibility for it and ask yourself, how am I choosing, right? How am I choosing to use my consciousness today? Where am I directing it? Because if we're directing it towards fear-based thoughts, or people out to get us, or, you know, this isn't good enough, or whatever else it is, right? We're going to get more of that back. There's going to be matches, and we're also going to pull that out of people, because we're going to pull out those parts, if they're in them, right, out of them, rather than giving them the opportunity to choose differently, right? And so our energy is influencing other people's energy. No, we don't have responsibility over them, right? But we can cultivate our consciousness in such a way that if someone's attacking us, we're choosing to send them love, right, from the depths of our soul. And that's why we have to cultivate our practices, because if you don't know how to love yourself, it's impossible to give anyone love, right? And so since there's no separation in our minds, right, since there's no separation in our minds, right, by you sharing love, right, they will receive it. And they can still choose whatever they want. They're going to, but they have the opportunity to be in the field of love rather than like defense or whatever else is coming through if they're attacking you, right? And that's why these practices are so important, because guess what? It's not natural, right? People are not naturally doing this. And so when you start to direct your consciousness in this way, it shifts and time starts to fold, right? You start to bring in more of what you truly desire, because you're deliberately using time to call in and energize and put that frequency in your body of what you actually desire, because you're limitless, right? You can do anything. And so you get to decide, what am I going to choose to access today? And so it gets to be a deliberate use of time of, what do I get to access today? And so some of the best times to use this practice is not when everything's going well. I will tell you that, right? The best time, obviously, to cultivate anything is before you need it. But it's really when like the walls are closing in on you, when things are crashing down, that, you know, your practices will get put to the test. And you will constantly get reminded of what you're choosing to experience, right? And so what ends up happening with our dimensions and why we get trapped in specific dimensions of time, and where, like, you know, there can be people in this reality that have the same job for 40 years and the same life for 40 years, same people around them for 40 years, and nothing changes, and they're okay with that. And that's not bad. There's nothing wrong with it, right? It's a choice. But there's no change in the dimension of time because they keep agreeing to the same concept of time. Honestly, sometimes it feels nice. I wish I had that. I wish I could do that sometimes. But there's this other part of us, and the part of yourself and why you're here is that you know that you're limitless, and that you can have anything that you desire in this world, and that there's things on your heart for a reason, and that you have desires for a reason, and that all of those desires, right, all of those desires are yours because they exist in a dimension of time. And so the moment you feel that thing on your heart where you're like, oh, I really want that, whether it's like a piece of clothing you can't afford, that you tell yourself you can't afford, right? Maybe you can't, like, in the physical dimension, but it's also a choice that you're calling in with, like, the bank accounts and like all the things, right? They're all choices. They're all reflecting to you your beliefs, right? And so whatever it is you're anchoring in the frequency of like, what would it feel like to like just be able to just buy that whenever I want, or to be able to have that house, or to be able to have that car, or to be able to like have great friendships. Like, what does it feel like to be in friendships where it's really life affirming and loving and kind and just like easy, where you don't have to like give anything, but I'm always constantly wanting to give and I'm always receiving, and like anchoring in those little moments of those little desires on your heart so that you shift into that dimension of time. And with consistency over time, by doing that again and again and again, you do call in those relationships, right? You do call in the things you desire. You probably will call in different work or more work. You know, it's like when you manifest money, you know, it's the joke is that you get more work because you wanted more money. And so you get to determine it. But what you have to do is to understand that every time that you define yourself, you wear a mask, and you put on an identity, and you choose to believe in linear time, right? And you choose to believe in this identity over aspects of your consciousness that are constantly evolving, right? And so the moment, like, I define myself as anything, right? The moment you define yourself as anything that puts you in a box, you put yourself in a linear concept of time. And so that's where, like, yeah, sometimes we have to define what we do and like the work that we do and the people that we serve, or, you know, whatever it is. But your consciousness doesn't need to be defined by that, right? Your human self is like a snap in the blip of time. It's so tiny. It's the tiniest aspect of yourself, because your self is eternal. Your self is forever going on and on and on and on and on, right? But you just get to be a little wave right here with us right now, and us seeing each other and reflecting one another. And so one of the most important practices that I do as I'm doing this is always, as I'm moving about my day, is asking myself, or feeling anytime I feel contracted, or noticing whenever I am constraining myself, right? Where I'm boxing myself into like, oh, like, what are some of the things people will say? I don't have the money for that. Or, oh, like, I can't believe this person did this to me again. Or I can't believe, you know, he's always late. Or, you know, all these things, like, we all do it. I find myself do it all the time. Like, I'm human, you know? And it's like, oh, do I need to define it by that? Because every time I define something, I'm reconfirming its reality, and I'm deliberately choosing its existence. And so you will notice, if you really do take up a conscious practice of watching yourself and where you're directing your thoughts and your energy, that we do this all the time, like microseconds. It's happening again and again and again, because there's so much programming inside of the body that is connected into the 3D time, that has created all these constructs of our reality that we are also co-agreeing to, which is why the earth dimension is still here, which is like the way deeper threading of it, right? And so the more we free ourselves from these limitations in time of thinking that we can't move between these dimensions, that it's not an out there concept. There are souls and spirits helping you out at every single moment. And the more you can tune into them, the more you can feel them. And the more you can know if it's true or not, is everything that's true is love. And everything that is false is anything other than love, right? Any fear-based programming, any scarcity, any lack, like that's simply not true because we are eternal souls, right? The universe is ever expanding, right? Love is the only truth and it's only found inside of you. And so when we're working on cultivating our experience that we're having on earth, we are really looking at taking off the mask and these identities that we've given ourselves, the beliefs that we've told ourselves, watching our thought patterns, which is where the yoga practice comes on. Like sit on your yoga mat for 1 hour and do the, I just put up a free practice on YouTube. That's like the first class in my virtual yoga studio that I'm launching in September. So it's just like, just for you, just for free, just for you to try. And watch your thoughts as you're going through it, because it will reveal everything to you about what you think about yourself, about what you tell yourself, about what you believe to be true about yourself. And none of it is true unless it's pure love and you're just like in the bliss of it, in the moment of it, you know, because in the moment, everything is always expanding out. And so in this moment, you have access to you 10 years down the road. You have access to you 10 and a half years down the road, 9 years down the road, every single aspect of you, past selves, future selves, different dimensional selves, like you have access to all of it now. And so I really want you to be aware of anytime anything slides into your consciousness, right? Anytime you're like, have a thought about someone, or you're sitting in a conversation with someone and they're saying these words, but for some reason, like in your mind, you're like, I feel something different, right? Move beyond the scenes of your experience and try to expand your awareness to really feel, right? Feel the essence of what the person in front of you, if you're having a conversation, is really letting off to you, because people's words and like what they're letting off sometimes can be very different. And so this is why I say, like, if you're going to do this practice, like it takes a certain readiness to have this sensitivity, because you'll notice some people lie to you and then you'll be like, whew. But it's also a great skill to have, because then you can smell BS. And I know all of you can smell BS, right? You know, when someone's saying something, you're like, don't believe it, right? But instead of just not believing it, expand your awareness and feel the words of what they're saying and feel the essence of them. And whatever slides into you, right, whatever comes into your consciousness is what's there. It's what's behind the scenes. And so that's why, like, when we talk about, like, you can never hide and there's no such thing as privacy. You are always at all times open and giving of yourself. And so is everybody else. Our minds are linked. All minds are linked, right? And so, and this is where, again, when life is hard, when you're in conversations you don't want to be in, you know, when it feels like things are crumbling, like this is when it's like, okay, this is when I get to cultivate and really hone in on this work. And when life is easy, that's when to really like practice and get used to and like build your skills in this work. But it's always for those hard moments. It's always for, you know, the times in life when you're put into hard situations and you actually have to consciously choose, right, differently, or consciously choose something other than what's in front of you, because you've called into your experience what is in front of you. And so all of these alternate dimensions, like, yes, there's angelic dimensions, of course. Like, yes, there's other dimensions of souls and like other past life experiences that are happening. And like all of these things, of course, how could it not be? We are not in isolation. We are not in separation. We are not alone, right? We are not moving through time in this linear fashion that we think we're like, I'm going to get to the end of death and I'm going to be reborn over here. And I'm like, just going to, maybe next lifetime I'll be able to do this. And maybe like in 100 lifetimes I'll be able to do that. Well, that 100 lifetime is accessible to you right now. And so it's your choice of when you get to call it in. It's your choice when you get to anchor in more love. It's your choice when you get to anchor in the ability to make a different choice when what is in front of you is not what you really want, right? Because even if it's not what you want, you're committed to it, right? If it's in front of you, because you're only creating what you believe to be true at every moment. So I think can someone tell me in the chat if this is making sense? I'm just trying to let it all come in and come through. It's really deciding to become aware of what is beyond your 3D self, right? And this is where it's total, Corey, yay, thank you. Hi, Corey. Total sense resonating. Thank you, Kat. This is where it's really helpful. It's just so helpful to have practices that teach you to love yourself, right? Because when we do get into this work, and this is where, like, when people do psychedelics and like they're not ready for it, and they like lose their minds because they saw too much too quickly, you know? I mean, we've all heard of these experiences, right? We really get to anchor this in a very gentle way, right? Really gentle. Because, you know, when life is hard, you have to be able to take care of yourself. You have to know what to feed yourself. You have to know to feed yourself. I am guilty of not feeding myself when life is hard, right? You have to know the practices to have, yoga, like things that make you feel good. Like when life is hard, the worst things to do is to hang out with negative people, drink, do drugs, like all the things that are going to like bring you down. And it's going to be the easiest thing to do because again, it's that energy, right? But that's why we cultivate our yoga practices. That's why we cultivate our breath work. That's why we learn how to take care of our bodies. You know, it's not the things that the pharmaceutical industry or like, you know, modern day medicine will teach us to do. It is really the alternative ways in which we take care of ourselves. Like, yes, there's like a time and a place for modern medicine. I can definitely attest to that, right? Never thought I would before, but I believe in it now. But how do you get in touch with past lives? Well, I'll talk about that in a moment. That's in my Unshakable course, actually. We do a lot of that work in that course. I do a lot of muscle testing for that kind of stuff. That's a really big topic. Maybe we should talk about that next time. But anchoring in your own self-care practices when life is hard or when you're going into this work, because things on the surface are not as they seem. You know what I mean? You know when you think you could know someone and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, that's not what I thought I knew. You have to be prepared to like handle that and to keep yourself centered in that, right? All of this is, you know, I think my favorite word for like what we do in this practice is upaya, skillful means. Like in Taoism and in Chinese, in fencing, like sword fighting, you have to know your opponent, right? And that's like what life is. You have to know like what you're dealing with in life. And so the moment you know, like there's a saying that when you're about to fight someone, right, look at their shoes before you go into battle with them, because if they're, the front of their foot is worn out, then they like to lunge, right? They're like a lunger. And if the heel of their foot is worn out, then they like to hang back, right? And so if you know that and you're about to spar with someone, I was also in kickboxing, just to let y'all know, you're about to spar with someone, when you're about to go, all you have to do if someone has the ball of their foot worn out is just move out of the way and they'll trip over themselves, right? If you know they like to hang back, then you know that they're going to be the one that's going to like dig their heels in, so you got to go for it. And so it's really about knowing what you're up against in life, because life is not easy, right? And so the better you know what you're up against, the better you can prepare yourself, the better you can hone in on your physical practices, the more prepared you are for life, the more gracefully you move through life, no matter the circumstances, right? And then that's where the circumstances don't dictate how you feel. Someone that doesn't have a sense of self, circumstances dictate how they feel. And if circumstances aren't going well, life is very hard for them, right? And so like you've codependency issues, like this is where that will show up. It's like, but it takes a certain someone, right? And this is like what these practices are. You're cultivating joy, you're cultivating grace, you're cultivating abundance. I will say I'm in like some of the hardest moments of my life right now, of my whole entire 35-year-old life. And I wake up and I'm like, life is amazing, because I choose it to be amazing. It could be really heavy if I wanted it to, right? But I'm always like focusing on the good stuff in life, because you have to. And that brings in more good stuff, even when life is hard, even when the 3D dimensions are shifting, even if the things that I tell myself I don't agree on are still there, like they're still there for a reason, right? And so when you can cultivate your own physical health in such a way, when you begin to bring in this work of allowing your mind to expand beyond the 3D world, when you see someone like pull up to you beside you in a car, rather than like looking at them as they are, like expand it. Start to feel into them. See if thoughts come into your head. Like, your enthusiasm is so infectious. I know some people tell me it doesn't matter what I'm talking about. They'll just be into it. Expand that awareness, right? And just see what comes into your thoughts. And so this is like probably one of the funnest things to play with. And you might be like, oh, is this invasive? It's like, no, everyone's always giving themselves away, right? And that's why you have to gain the skill set to watch your own thoughts, so that you're not giving yourself away, right? So that you are so refined in your own energy that the thoughts that are coming from you are just pure, that it's like, even if someone's yelling at me, I'm sending them love, because there's no point in hooking in to anything negative, because anything that's not love is not true. So why would you keep confirming the mistruth that is being reflected to you? right? And so this is a very fun practice. I notice this very often. If you have like a child, my child is very pure because she like lives in the woods and is just like, she's 5 and she says things and I'm like, oh, she's reading thoughts right now. She'll tell me things and I'm like, wow, she really reads people's thoughts. She's like, I never said that. And I'm like, wow. And we'll do the same thing with each other where I'll be thinking something and then she'll say it. Like if I'm thinking about crepes for breakfast and it's been like 2 weeks since we've had crepes, like this is just small examples, but pay attention to them, right? Like literally a second later, she'll be like, Mama, it's been so long. We haven't had crepes. Can we eat crepes today? And it's like, these things are not random. Everything in your experience is so deliberate. But kids, especially young ones, right, will be very reflective in this exercise because they aren't on the surface like we are because we're so programmed as we age in this 3D dimension, where kids are more feeling into every dimension and into every experience. Like my daughter will tell me when things happen, she's like, she had this dream once that one of her like fingernails fell off and then I slammed my finger in the door and my thumbnail eventually fell off like 2 months later. And she told me, she's like, oh, it's so funny because I had this one dream once that this happened and now this happened. And she'll start to put it all together and you'll start to see like even in dreams, this is a powerful place to play because your dreams are always sliding between dimensions. You literally enter a different dimension when you dream, do you not? Right? And so that's pretty much proof of different dimensions. And then you can more bend it to your will, especially if you learn how to wake up in your dreams and become liminal because you're not defined by the 3D world in your dreams, right? You can fly, you can like dive under, you can like breathe underwater, you can, lift up huge trucks and like all this kind of stuff in your dreams, right? And so really play with just expanding and deciding to be aware of what is around the edges of 3D reality. And don't brush it off. Like if you see a flash of light come through, or, you start to see people's like the colors in their energy bodies, or you like feel certain things about people where you're like, ooh, I don't like that feeling. Or like, you're like, oh, I really like this feeling. And you're playing with something beyond this 3D dimension that we've agreed upon. And whatever's coming through, you're not imagining it. Like it's there. And trust that, right? Because it couldn't exist. It couldn't exist for you without it being true. So I think that's all. Actually, the most important part to leave you with today is the one thing that will shift where you are in time, right? The one thing that will shift it is the willingness to be where you are right now differently. That's it. You don't have to go to a temple. You don't have to go on a flight and go travel. You don't have to go anywhere else. The only thing that will shift where you are in time is to be where you are now differently. The moment you notice a thought in your head that's keeping you in a loop, changing it, right? Leaving that loop, feeling a different energy, moving your awareness somewhere else that feels expansive for you, remembering a future vision of yourself, a future self, and staying there, right? Abiding more in what feels really expansive and good in your body, and abiding less in the things that are holding you into your limitations, right? Abiding where you are, being where you are differently is what will shift these dimensions for you. So, everyone, I hope that was a fun chat. If you ever have questions, right, let me know. Put your biggest takeaway if you're watching the replay in the comments below. I love when you guys comment on these videos. And if you do want to join the virtual yoga space that I'm launching on September 1st, and I've already put up the first video, but it's also on YouTube. I just wanted to like share it for everyone for free so they can have an experience of it. It's $37. It's like the pre-sale founders pricing. So you can get in for September and lock yourself in, and then it's going to go up to $47. And it's going to be 2 yoga practices, 2 breathwork practices, and it's going to be with the season. So we're at the end of summer. And so we're in the end of summer, you want to like clear heat out of your body so that when autumn contracts back into you, it doesn't get stuck in your lungs and you get respiratory issues, right? And then that heat, if it gets stuck in your body, turns into arthritis, which is your bones and your waters in winter because it's dried out all of your waters. And so it's going to be moving through the seasons. There's going to be the 2 practices of the yoga, the 2 of the breath work, and then we're going to have a Q&A. And there's also a course feed. So like if things are coming up, like it's going to be a co-creative effort. When things are coming up in your body, when things are coming up in your life, the reflections, the insights that you're having, like it is a place for us to like really gather and like learn about our bodies together more And then there'll be a live Q&A with me too, where we'll take all those conversations into it, best way to move in the body, the most alignment in the body, all that kind of stuff. So I'm really excited about it. I know a few of you already on this live call are already in there. And yeah, it's just so beautiful that a lot of you reach out to me on the messages on the app, and it just feels like such a beautiful space where we can all gather together in like every single country. Like it's just so incredible. So thank you for being in the app. Thank you for being here live. Thank you if you're watching the replay. It's just so much fun to have you guys here and to have you interested and excited about this stuff. And if you ever have like questions or topics that you want to bring into these alchemy calls, make sure that you either put it, there's like a community page in the alchemy, or you can message me on Instagram or right inside of the app. Like all of those work. Otherwise, yeah, have a beautiful, beautiful day, and I'll see you in the next call.